beneath the golden radiance of the Ur-tree, beneath the sprawling kingdoms where demigods wage their endless wars, beneath even the roots that burrow deep into the earth's forgotten places, there exists a realm of eternal twilight. Here, in the suffocating darkness that no natural sun has touched for countless ages, sprawl the ruins of civilizations that dared to dream beyond their station. The air tastes of ancient stone and bitter regret, heavy with the weight of a punishment so severe that even time itself seems to have abandoned these forsaken depths. Follow the spectral glow of ghost candles long enough through these underground labyrinths, and you'll find them. The eternal cities. Nokron, Nokstella, and the shattered remnants of a third city whose very name has been erased from history. Above their crumbling spires hangs a false sky, a mockery of the heavens they once knew, where artificial stars provide the only light in their endless night. These aren't mere ruins. They're monuments to the greatest act of rebellion the lands between has ever witnessed, and the terrible price of challenging divine authority. Welcome, lore seekers, to another deep dive with Keen 7 Lore, where we excavate the buried truths that shape the worlds we explore. Today, we descend into one of Elden Ring's most fascinating mysteries, the sin of the eternal cities and the Nox people who once called them home. This is a story of ambition that reached too high, of mortals who sought to forge their own destiny free from the greater will's design, and of a punishment so absolute that it reshaped the very geography of the world. The Nox weren't content to simply exist under the cosmic order imposed by the Two Fingers and their master beyond the stars. They dreamed of something more, a lord of their own making, an age of stars guided by their will rather than divine decree. In their underground laboratories and silver forges, they pursued technologies that blurred the line between life and artifice, between mortality and godhood. They created weapons capable of wounding entities that should have been untouchable, and for this audacity, they were cast into darkness eternal. But here's what makes their story truly compelling. They never surrendered. Even now, ages after their banishment, the Nox continue their work in the shadows. Their artificial life forms still patrol the empty streets. Their silver tears still flow through ancient channels, waiting for a purpose that may never come. And somewhere in the darkness, they still whisper of a Lord of Night who will one day lift them from their imprisonment and usher in the age of stars they've awaited for millennia. To understand the magnitude of the Nox's transgression, we must first understand who they were before their fall. The archaeological evidence scattered throughout the eternal cities paints a picture of a civilization that rivaled, perhaps even exceeded, the technological and magical achievements of the Golden Order at its height. These weren't primitive people stumbling toward forbidden knowledge. They were sophisticated, deliberate, and utterly convinced of the righteousness of their cause. The Nox civilization flourished in an era when the night sky still held true stars, not the bastardized projections of the Ur-tree's influence that later generations would mistake for celestial bodies. They were astronomers and astrologers, reading destiny in the constellations and drawing power from lunar phases. The massive orreries found in their ruins, still turning despite centuries of neglect, demonstrate an understanding of cosmic mechanics that surpasses anything achieved by the scholars of Raya Lucaria. Their entire society was structured around this celestial worship. Night maidens who conducted sacred rituals under starlight, swordstresses who channeled stellar energies through their flowing weapons, and monks who preserved the astronomical knowledge that guided their civilization. The architecture of the eternal cities reflects this cosmic obsession. Buildings spiral upward like prayers to the night sky, their surfaces covered in constellation maps and lunar calendars carved with such precision that they still accurately track celestial movements even in their underground prison. The famous upside-down structures found throughout Nokron and Nokstella weren't architectural failures or damage from their banishment. They were deliberate constructions meant to mirror the heavens above and below, creating a perfect reflection of the cosmic order they sought to understand and ultimately control. Their mastery of what we might call magi technology was unprecedented. While the Golden Order would later achieve great feats through incantations and faith, the Nox pursued a different path. One that merged sorcery with material science to create wonders that defied easy categorization. The flowing weapons wielded by their swordstresses weren't simply enchanted metal. They were composed of a liquid silver substance that responded to will and intent, reshaping itself mid-combat to become sword, whip, or drill as the situation demanded. This same principle, refined and perfected over generations, would eventually lead to their greatest and most blasphemous creations. The silver tears represent perhaps the purest expression of Nox ingenuity. These beings, if we can call them that, exist in a state between life and non-life, composed entirely of animated quicksilver that can assume any form, mimic any creature, and retain the memories and abilities of anything they've touched. They're not golems or constructs in the traditional sense. They exhibit learning, adaptation, and something disturbingly close to consciousness. The large silver tear found in Nokstella demonstrates abilities that shouldn't be possible for artificial creation, transforming seamlessly between humanoid and monstrous forms while maintaining perfect combat effectiveness in each. This technology reached its apex with the creation of the mimic tears, beings of such perfect imitation that they could replicate not just the physical form but the very essence of whatever they copied. The mimic tear, that players can acquire as a spirit ash, is described as the result of an attempt by the Eternal City to forge a lord. Think about the implications of that statement. The Nox weren't just creating artificial life, they were attempting to manufacture divinity itself, to craft a being worthy of lordship through pure technological achievement rather than divine appointment. The dragonkin soldiers represent another branch of this artificial life experimentation. These massive creatures, part dragon and part construct, were grown or built. The distinction becomes meaningless with Nox technology, to serve as weapons in whatever conflict the Nox foresaw coming. Unlike the dragons that would later serve the Golden Order, these beings owed no allegiance to any outer god or greater will. They were loyal only to their creators, bound by whatever process gave them life rather than faith or covenant. Now we reach a fascinating intersection with one of the game's ongoing mysteries. Many scholars of Eternal City lore have noted the striking similarities between Nox artificial life technology and the Albinaurics, those artificial beings created by unclear means who suffer from inherent instability in their forms. The first-generation Albinaurics share the Nox's silver-white coloration and liquid properties, while the second-generation's frog-like features echo the transformative abilities of silver tears. While we lack definitive proof, the evidence strongly suggests the Albinaurics represent either a continuation of Nox experiments or an attempt by others to recreate their achievements with imperfect understanding of the underlying principles. The strategic placement of our mid-video reminder feels natural here as we transition from the Nox's creations to their ultimate act of defiance. If you're finding value in this exploration of Elden Ring's deepest mysteries, consider subscribing to support the channel and join our growing community of lore enthusiasts who delve into gaming's most intricate narratives. Your support truly makes these deep investigations possible, allowing us to uncover the stories hidden beneath the surface of the worlds we love. The creation of artificial life, revolutionary as it was, paled in comparison to the Nox's ultimate goal. The creation of their own lord, free from the influence of the greater will and its two fingers. This wasn't mere political rebellion or theological disagreement. The Nox sought to fundamentally restructure the cosmic order, to replace the Golden Order's age of fracture and faith with an age of stars guided by wisdom and will rather than distant divine mandate. To achieve this impossible dream, they needed a weapon capable of harming entities that existed beyond physical reality. The Fingerslayer blade stands as the most audacious and blasphemous creation in the history of the lands between. This isn't hyperbole. The item description explicitly states it was born of a corpse and represents the high treason of the Eternal City. The blade's very existence violates fundamental laws that the Greater Will established to protect its vassals and maintain cosmic order. Understanding what the Fingerslayer blade actually does requires grappling with Elden Ring's complex theology. The two fingers serve as interpreters of the Greater Will's intent, providing guidance to the lands between through their connection to this cosmic entity. But they're not merely prophets or messengers, they're physical extensions of the Greater Will's power, making them theoretically untouchable by mortal weapons. The Fingerslayer blade changed that equation entirely. Recent discoveries in the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion have shed new light on what the Nox actually accomplished with their weapon. The revelation of Metyr, Mother of Fingers, provides crucial context for understanding the Fingerslayer blade's true purpose and power. Metyr, we learn, was the first falling star to arrive in the lands between, the progenitor of all two fingers and finger creepers that would follow. She possessed something unique among the Greater Will's servants, a ringed finger that served as her direct connection to the Greater Will itself. The evidence strongly suggests that the Nox used the Fingerslayer blade to sever this ringed finger, effectively cutting Metyr's connection to the Greater Will and, by extension, disrupting the entire communication network between the cosmic entity and its terrestrial vassals. This wasn't just an attack on a single entity, it was an assault on the very infrastructure of divine authority in the lands between. The Nox had effectively performed cosmic surgery, attempting to free their world from external influence through one precisely targeted strike. The creation of such a weapon required more than just technical skill. It demanded materials and knowledge that shouldn't have been accessible to mortal beings. The blade being born of a corpse takes on new meaning when we consider the various theories about its origin. Some scholars suggest the blade was forged from the corpse of a minor god or demigod who fell during the age before the Erdtree. Others propose a connection to Godwin's later assassination, though the timeline makes this unlikely for the original blade. The most disturbing possibility is that the Nox somehow acquired and repurposed the corpse of a Two Fingers itself, turning the Greater Will's own essence against it. The Nox took extensive precautions to protect themselves during this act of cosmic rebellion. The crystalline mirror helms worn by their scholars weren't mere protective equipment, they were specifically designed to ward off the intervention of the Greater Will and its vassals. These helmets created a kind of metaphysical shield, reflecting or deflecting the divine sight that would normally detect and prevent such blasphemous acts. The fact that the Nox felt such protection was necessary tells us they fully understood the magnitude of what they were attempting and the retribution it would bring. War Counselor. Iji's connection to this conspiracy adds another layer of complexity. This giant, advisor to the Carrion royal family and trusted ally of Ranni the Witch, wears a mirror helm identical to those used by the Nox scholars. His involvement suggests the conspiracy against the Greater Will extended beyond the Eternal Cities themselves, creating a network of rebels that may have included giants, carrions, and other groups dissatisfied with the cosmic status quo. When Iji is eventually assassinated by Black Knife assassins, his mirror helm fails to protect him, perhaps indicating that such protections only work against divine intervention, not mortal blades. The moment the Fingerslayer blade struck its target, the fate of the Eternal Cities was sealed. The Greater Will's response was swift, absolute, and terrifyingly creative in its cruelty. Rather than simply destroying the Nox, which would have been within its power, the Greater Will chose a punishment that would serve as an eternal reminder of the price of rebellion. The cities weren't just buried, they were fundamentally severed from the cosmos they had loved and studied for generations. The arrival of Astel, natural born of the void, marked the beginning of the end for Nox civilization. This entity, described as a malformed star born in the lightless void, descended upon the Eternal Cities with the force of divine wrath made manifest. Astel wasn't merely a creature or weapon, it was a living catastrophe. A cosmic antibody deployed to excise what the Greater Will now viewed as a cancer within its ordered system. The devastation it wrought went beyond physical destruction, though the ruins of the nameless Eternal City bear witness to that as well. Astel's assault began with a rain of meteors that shattered buildings and killed thousands, but this was merely the prelude. The true horror came when it deployed its signature ability, the waves of gravitational destruction that could unmake matter at a fundamental level. Entire districts of the Nameless Eternal City were not just destroyed but erased, leaving behind the twisted wreckage and gravitational anomalies that still plague the region. The survivors described, in what few records remain, how Astel seemed to feed on their despair, growing stronger with each wave of destruction until its very presence warped reality around it. The complete annihilation of the Nameless Eternal City serves as the most extreme example of the Greater Will's punishment. Today, only scattered ruins remain in the deep-root depths, so thoroughly destroyed that we can't even determine its original name. The massive crater where the city center once stood has become a gathering place for the spirits of the dead, as if the trauma of its destruction created a permanent wound in reality that draws the deceased like a gravitational well. The few architectural elements that survived, broken pillars, shattered archways, fragments of once grand buildings, suggest this city may have been the greatest of the three, which perhaps explains why it suffered the most complete destruction. Nokron and Nokstella fared marginally better, if being buried alive can be considered mercy. These cities were pulled down into the earth through gravitational manipulation that defied natural geology. Mountains moved, rivers changed course, and entire landscapes reformed to swallow the cities whole. But the Greater Will's cruelty didn't stop at mere burial. It ensured the Nox would spend eternity contemplating what they had lost by creating the false night sky that still hangs above their ruins. This artificial firmament represents perhaps the cruelest aspect of their punishment. The Nox, who had built their entire civilization around stellar worship and astronomical study, were given a mockery of the heavens they loved. The false stars provide just enough light to see by but offer none of the cosmic truth the Nox once read in real constellations. They're static, lifeless projections, a painted ceiling in a prison cell, taunting the inmates with memories of freedom. The psychological torture of this arrangement cannot be overstated. Every Nox survivor who looked up would be reminded that their connection to the true cosmos had been severed, possibly forever. The destruction of their black moon added another dimension to their suffering. This celestial body, unique to the Nox and central to their magical practices, was shattered into fragments that became the memory stones scattered throughout the lands between. Each stone contains a fragment of the moon's power, allowing sorcerers to memorize additional spells, but for the Nox, they represent the dismemberment of their civilization's heart. Imagine if the sun was broken into pieces and distributed to your enemies as trinkets. That's the level of desecration the Nox endured. Life in the Eternal Cities after their banishment became an exercise in stubborn survival against impossible odds. The Nox who survived the initial catastrophe faced a choice: surrender to despair or adapt to their new reality. Remarkably, they chose adaptation, transforming their cities from centers of celestial study to underground fortresses of patient resistance. The fact that their civilization persisted at all under such circumstances speaks to either admirable determination or dangerous delusion, depending on one's perspective. The immediate practical challenges were staggering. Cut off from the surface, the Nox had to develop entirely new methods of sustaining themselves. The bioluminescent plants that now grow throughout the Eternal Cities weren't native to these depths. They were cultivated through careful magical manipulation to provide both food and light. The giant ants that patrol the ruins weren't originally peaceful creatures, but were somehow domesticated or pacified to serve as a labor force. The underground rivers of Siofra and Ainsel became lifelines, providing water and serving as transportation routes between the scattered remnants of Nox civilization. The social structure of post-banishment Nox society underwent radical transformation. The Night Maidens, once ceremonial figures who conducted rituals under starlight, became the de facto leaders of the survivors, their knowledge of stellar magic adapted to work even without true stars to guide them. The swordstresses evolved from ceremonial guards to active defenders against the various threats that emerged in the underground. from the basilisks that leaked in from connecting caverns to the occasional gravitational anomaly left behind by Astel's rampage. The monks took on the crucial role of memory keepers, preserving not just the technical knowledge of their civilization, but the cultural memories of what life had been like under true stars. The massive libraries found in both Nokron and Nokstella contain thousands of stone tablets and silver scrolls documenting everything from astronomical observations to personal diaries, a desperate attempt to prevent their history from being forgotten. Many of these texts speak of a prophesied Lord of Night who would one day lift them from their imprisonment, suggesting this belief emerged almost immediately after their banishment as a psychological necessity for survival. The chair. Crypts represent one of the most enigmatic adaptations to underground life. These massive sarcophagi, designed to hold bodies in seated positions, line the pathways of both major cities. The seated position itself carries significance. In many cultures, including those that influenced Elden Ring's design, dying seated represents readiness to rise again and refusal to accept the finality of death. For the Noks, who had spent generations trying to create artificial life, this burial practice might represent their belief that death itself was merely another problem to be solved through sufficient application of knowledge and will. The giant maiden statues found throughout the city serve multiple purposes that become apparent only through careful observation. Yes, they're monuments to some idealized or divine feminine figure, possibly related to their reverence for the Black Moon or an unknown goddess of night. But they also function as architectural supports, their outstretched arms literally holding up the ceiling of their underground prison. This dual symbolism, beauty and function, worship and pragmatism, encapsulates the Noks' approach to their imprisonment. They would maintain their culture and dignity even while adapting to harsh practical realities. The inverted architecture of the Eternal Cities deserves special attention as both an adaptation to their punishment and a statement of continued defiance. Buildings hanging upside down from cavern ceilings weren't damaged by the city's burial. They were constructed this way afterward, a deliberate architectural choice that serves both practical and symbolic purposes. Practically, it maximizes the usable space in their underground chambers. Symbolically, it represents the complete inversion of their fortune. What was above is now below. What was exalted is now buried. Yet by embracing this inversion rather than fighting it, the Noks demonstrated that they could adapt to any reality the greater will imposed upon them. The silver tears left behind throughout the city serve as more than mere guardians of empty ruins. These beings, products of the Noks' artificial life experiments, continue to patrol and protect with a diligence that transcends simple programming. They adapt to intruders, learn from combat encounters, and seem to retain some fragmentary memory of what their creators intended them to become. The large silver tear in Nokstella that can transform into multiple forms, including a troll and a dragon, might represent the closest the Noks ever came to creating their Lord of Night, a being of infinite possibility waiting for the right catalyst to achieve true consciousness. The ecosystem that developed in the Eternal Cities following their banishment deserves recognition as a triumph of adaptation. The underground rivers brought life, but they also brought danger. The giant ants established colonies that coexist surprisingly peacefully with the Noks' ruins, suggesting some form of mutual understanding or ancient pact. The ancestral followers found in the Siofra and Ainsel River regions seem to have developed their own culture parallel to but separate from the Noks, worshipping the spectral ancestors that haunt these depths. The various creatures that inhabit these spaces, from the relatively harmless glowbugs to the decidedly dangerous basilisks, create a complex web of interactions that has sustained itself for ages. Despite the comprehensive nature of their punishment, the Noks never abandoned their ultimate goal. Evidence throughout the Eternal City shows continued experimentation with artificial life, continued refinement of their liquid silver technologies, and continued preparation for the prophesied Age of Stars. The Night Maidens still conduct their rituals, though now they must make do with false stars and memory stones instead of true celestial bodies. The sword stresses still train with their flowing weapons, maintaining combat traditions for a war they believe will eventually come. The influence of the Eternal Cities extends far beyond their underground prisons, seeping into the surface world through various channels, both intentional and accidental. The towns of Celia and Ordina and Caelid and the consecrated snowfield respectively show clear Nox architectural influence, suggesting either pre-banishment colonies or post-banishment escape attempts. These towns maintain the Nox tradition of sorceress study and guard their secrets behind magical barriers, requiring would-be investigators to light flames or navigate invisible pathways to prove their worthiness. Celia, town of sorcery, bears the most obvious Nox influence. Its buildings mirror the architectural style of the Eternal Cities, and its sorcerers study night-based magic that draws from the same stellar traditions the Nox once practiced. The Nox flowing sword found here provides a direct link, while the presence of the Nox swordstress and Nox priest spirit ashes in the surrounding area suggests some Nox survivors may have escaped to the surface during or after their city's burial. The town's founder, the sorceress, Selen's master, may have had direct contact with Nox refugees or access to their preserved knowledge. Even the golden capital of Leyndell shows traces of Eternal City architecture in its lower levels, particularly in the subterranean shunning grounds. These areas, older than the Erdtree capital above, incorporate design elements and construction techniques that match those found in Nokron and Nokstella. This suggests either that Leyndell was built upon a pre-existing Nox settlement, or that Marika deliberately incorporated Nox architectural knowledge into her capital's foundation, a peculiar choice given their rebellion, unless we consider the cut content suggesting deeper connections between Marika and the Nox. The most significant manifestation of Eternal City influence comes through Ranni the Witch's questline, where the Nox's ancient rebellion against the Greater Will finds new expression. Ranni's entire conspiracy, from stealing the Rune of Death to orchestrating the Night of the Black Knives, follows the template the Nox established. She even requires the Fingerslayer blade to complete her goal of ushering in the Age of Stars, using the very weapon the Nox created to sever her two fingers and free herself from the Greater Will's influence. The Black Knife assassins themselves may represent another strand of Nox influence. These warriors, who accomplished the assassination of Godwyn the Golden using blades imbued with the Rune of Death, employ techniques and equipment reminiscent of Nox traditions. Their ability to move unseen, their use of specialized weapons capable of harming divine beings, and their coordinated assault on multiple targets simultaneously all echo the careful planning and execution of the Nox's original rebellion. While we cannot prove direct lineage, the philosophical and methodological similarities are striking. The mimic tier that players can acquire and upgrade into one of the game's most powerful, Spirit Ashes, represents the ultimate vindication of Nox artificial life technology. This being, which perfectly replicates the player's abilities and equipment, becomes instrumental in defeating the very forces that condemned its creators. There's profound irony in the fact that a creation born from the Nox's rebellion against divine authority becomes a tool for overthrowing the Golden Order itself. The Nox sought to forge a lord, and in a sense, they succeeded, just not in the way they originally intended. The fingerprint armor sets and weapons found throughout the Eternal Cities tell their own story of persistence and adaptation. These items, marked with the fingerprint walls that symbolize the Two Fingers' authority, have been repurposed and corrupted by the Nox to serve their own ends. The fingerprint stone shield, one of the heaviest and most defensive items in the game, bears the marking of the two fingers, but was clearly modified by the Nox to serve as protection against divine retribution. They took the very symbol of their oppression and transformed it into a tool of resistance. The theological implications of the Nox's rebellion and punishment extend far beyond their immediate story, touching on fundamental questions about free will, divine authority, and the nature of cosmic order in Elden Ring's universe. The greater will, through its violent response to the Nox's use of the Fingerslayer blade, revealed itself not as an omnipotent, unassailable deity, but as an entity that could be threatened, wounded, and forced to react defensively. This vulnerability fundamentally undermines the theological foundation upon which the Golden Order was built. Consider what the existence of the Fingerslayer blade actually means. If the greater will and its vassals were truly divine in the classical sense, omnipotent, omniscient, existing beyond physical harm, then no weapon forged by mortals should be able to affect them. The fact that the Nox could create such a weapon suggests either that the greater will operates within certain limitations, or that the Nox possessed knowledge and capabilities that approach the divine themselves. Either possibility raises troubling questions about the nature of godhood in this universe. The greater will's choice of punishment also reveals much about its nature. A truly omnipotent deity could have simply erased the Nox from existence, removed them from the timeline entirely, or transformed them into something else. Instead, it chose burial, darkness, and the slow torture of eternal imprisonment. This suggests either limitations on its power or a deliberately cruel nature that prefers suffering to simple annihilation. The greater will wanted the Nox to serve as an example, their buried cities, a warning to others who might consider rebellion. The parallel to real-world myths enriches our understanding of this narrative. The Tower of Babel story tells of humanity's attempt to build a tower to heaven, punished by the confusion of languages and scattering of peoples. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and was condemned to eternal torture. Lucifer's rebellion against divine authority resulted in his casting down from heaven. The Nox's story incorporates elements from all these myths while adding its own unique twist. They didn't just rebel, they successfully wounded their oppressor before being punished. The concept of artificial life creation as blasphemy appears throughout human mythology and philosophy. From the golem of Jewish folklore to Frankenstein's monster, the idea that creating life represents an usurpation of divine prerogative resonates across cultures. The Nox took this transgression further by attempting to create not just life, but a being worthy of lordship, essentially trying to manufacture their own god. This represents the ultimate expression of humanistic ambition, the belief that through knowledge and will, mortals can achieve anything, even divinity itself. Yet we must ask, was the Nox's rebellion truly unjustified? They lived under a cosmic order imposed by an alien intelligence that viewed the lands between as little more than a testing ground or petri dish. The two fingers claimed to interpret the greater will's desires, but as we learned throughout the game, this communication was imperfect at best, manipulative at worst. The Nox sought self-determination, the right to forge their own destiny free from external control. From this perspective, their rebellion becomes not blasphemy but a fight for freedom. Their punishment, not divine justice, but tyrannical oppression. The question of whether the Nox's punishment was proportionate to their crime haunts the narrative. They wounded one entity, Metyr, and for this, their entire civilization was destroyed, their cities buried, their moons shattered, thousands killed, and the survivors condemned to eternal darkness. The collective punishment of an entire people for the actions of their leadership violates most concepts of justice, divine or otherwise. Children who had no part in the rebellion suffered alongside the conspirators. Future generations were born into imprisonment for crimes committed before their birth. This raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of the Greater Will's order. If it responds to challenges with such disproportionate violence, can it truly claim moral authority? The Golden Order preaches compassion, justice, and the natural harmony of all things under the Erd Tree, yet its foundation rests upon the buried cities of those who dared disagree. Every prayer offered in the churches of Marika is built upon the suffering of the Nox, every incantation of Golden Order. Fundamentalism powered by a system that buried entire civilizations for seeking alternatives. As we near the conclusion of this journey through the shadows of the eternal cities, it becomes clear that the Nox's story is far from over. The prophecy of the Lord of Night and the coming age of stars, dismissed by many as the desperate hope of a dying culture, finds unexpected fulfillment through Ranni's questline. The Lunar Princess, using tools and knowledge preserved by the Nox across millennia, accomplishes what they could not, the complete severing of the lands between from the Greater Will's influence. The irony is profound. The Greater Will's harsh punishment of the Nox, meant to serve as an eternal warning against rebellion, instead preserved the tools and knowledge necessary for its eventual overthrow. By burying the cities rather than destroying them, by allowing survivors to continue their work in the darkness, the Greater Will created the perfect conditions for its own downfall. The Nox's patience, their refusal to abandon hope despite centuries of imprisonment, their careful preservation of the Fingerslayer blade and other artifacts. All of this contributed to Ranni's success. When players complete Ranni's questline and usher in the Age of Stars, they're not just choosing one ending among many, they're vindicating the Nox's sacrifice and fulfilling their ancient dream. The cold, dark night that Ranni promises might seem harsh compared to the golden promises of other endings, but for the Nox, it represents liberation. True stars would once again shine in the sky. The cosmic order would be guided by wisdom and choice rather than distant divine mandate. The very things they were punished for believing become the foundation of a new age. The unanswered questions surrounding the Nox add layers of mystery that may never be fully resolved. The cut content suggesting the Nox were descendants of Marika raises fascinating possibilities about the Queen Eternal's true nature and motivations. Did she bury her own people? Was her rise to godhood built upon their sacrifice? The presence of Nox architectural elements in Lanedale and the fact that the Black Knife assassins were scions of the Eternal City suggests connections that run deeper than surface-level influence. The true name and nature of the nameless Eternal City remains one of the game's most tantalizing mysteries. Was it the first city to fall, made an example for the others? Was it the seed of Nox power, destroyed more thoroughly to prevent any possibility of recovery? Or did it perhaps succeed in some goal we don't understand? Its destruction actually a form of transcendence? The ghosts that gather in its ruins seem drawn there by something more than mere death, as if the city's destruction created a permanent wound in reality that calls to the deceased. The ultimate fate of the Nox people themselves remains ambiguous. While we encounter various Nox enemies and find their equipment throughout the Eternal Cities, we never meet a living speaking member of their civilization. Have they all become something else? Silver tears, spirits, or worse? Do communities of survivors exist in hidden corners of the underground, still maintaining their culture and awaiting their prophesied salvation? The game leaves these questions deliberately open, allowing the mystery to persist even after the credits roll. As we reach the end of this exploration into one of Elden Ring's deepest and most tragic stories, we're left with a civilization that refused to accept their place in a cosmic order they saw as unjust. The Nox dared to dream of a different future, one where mortals could forge their own destiny free from the whims of outer gods and their earthly vassals. They paid an almost unimaginable price for this dream. Their cities buried, their moon destroyed, their people scattered and changed beyond recognition. Yet in their failure lies a strange form of success. The tools they created, the knowledge they preserved, and the dream they refused to abandon all contributed to the eventual possibility of overthrowing the very system that condemned them. Every tarnished who wields a mimic tear, every sorcerer who studies Nokron's magic, every player who completes Ranni's questline participates in the vindication of the Nox's rebellion. They proved that the Greater Will could be challenged, that its vassals could be wounded, that alternative futures were possible even if they themselves wouldn't live to see them. The Eternal Cities stand as monuments to both the price and power of rebellion. Their empty streets and false stars tell a story of punishment and perseverance, of a people who chose the darkness of defiance over the light of submission. Whether we see them as tragic heroes or dangerous blasphemers depends largely on our perspective on divine authority and mortal ambition. But one thing remains certain: The Nox changed the course of history in the lands between, their rebellion rippling forward through time to create possibilities they could only dream of. Their sin, in the end, was not the creation of artificial life or the study of forbidden knowledge. Their true transgression was believing that mortals deserved the right to choose their own fate, to reject a cosmic order that didn't serve them, to reach for godhood, not through worship or submission but through will and ingenuity. For this belief, they paid with everything, and yet, in the strange arithmetic of cosmic justice, they may have gotten exactly what they wanted, just not in the way they expected. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the shadows beneath the lands between, where buried cities whisper of rebellions past and futures yet to come. The story of the eternal cities reminds us that in worlds where gods walk among mortals, the greatest act of courage might be refusing to kneel even when the price is darkness eternal. If you found value in this exploration of Elden Ring's rich lore, please consider subscribing to Keans of Lore for more investigations into gaming's most intricate narratives. Together, we'll continue to uncover the buried truths and hidden stories that make these virtual worlds so compelling. Until next time, remember, sometimes the greatest light comes from those willing to embrace the darkness in pursuit of their dreams. The stars may be false above the eternal cities, but the hope they represent burns eternal.